Hello, dear friends. It is a sincere pleasure to welcome you again, and today we're going to talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, one of the greatest crises of our time is the crisis of the value of life. And we talked about how false values, power, and money are becoming more important than people's lives. And this indicates the level of development of our society. And in our conversations, you mentioned that climatic changes and the climate Cerberus is the essence of our life, the essence of our existence, of all the negativity that we've been fostering for a very long time, for millennia. Of course, a question arises, is there anything that can still be done in today's conditions? And you said that, of course, there is, if we have time and if there are true heroes who are willing to challenge not only the Cerberus itself, but first and foremost, human stupidity, as well as striving for power, profit, and inhumaneness. And I'm very happy that there are such people all over the world. First of all, I'm talking about the participants of the Allatra movement and volunteers of the Creative Society project. They are really very brave, sensible, and honest people. But I'm also very happy that beyond the Creative Society project and beyond the Allatra movement, there are people who understand the global scale of what is happening to the climate, and they are also looking for solutions. In today's conversation, I certainly cannot ignore the appeal by Egon Cholakian, who recently addressed politicians, scientists, and ordinary people. He said that today our planet is basically on the verge of self destruction and that it can easily repeat the fate of Mars. We have very little time to find a solution, and we need to unite all the scientific potential. In fact, he proposes to establish such a unified research center, and of course, participants of the Creative Society project publish fragments of his speech. And I would like to ask you today as well, what do you think about all this, about Egon Cholakian's appeal, and about the whole situation in general?
Everything is actually clear. On the one hand, he's right, he's 100% right. But you see, there is a catch, friends. He's not talking about the Creative Society. As a scientist, he approaches it, I would say, in a pragmatic and prudent way, based on his experience, and he proposes the model he envisions. In fact, it has the right to exist, and in general, it can serve as a precursor to the transition period into the Creative Society. If we look at the main thesis of his speech, when he addresses politicians, what does he say? He says that everyone should bury the hatches of war, meaning should sit down at the same table and come to an agreement. Everyone should open their borders so that people can already begin to migrate freely, so that our world has time to adapt to this situation which we have entered. At the moment, it's already pointless to say that we will enter somewhere some climatic changes at some point. In other words, one thing is clear from his message. The time has come and we've already entered the cycle, well, almost entered. And we are talking about this. I mean, the process has already begun. And in order to stop it, as he says, we need a unified research center. He is basically saying the same thing that we are saying. It is clear that he has studied us well. But not everything is that simple, and not everything is that easy, in my opinion. If we consider the Creative Society, then we, ordinary people, do not have an opportunity to communicate with politicians directly. No one wants to hear us and no one will hear us. We tried to communicate with scientists more than once, but they did not hear us. Yes, there are many scientists in Allatra. It is really true, no one has ever hidden this fact. But those are true scientists. Yet, they've been working, let's say, sort of underground for more than 20 years, you see. Why? Because those who have tried to speak openly about the changes that are taking place against the mainstream agenda of CO2 and climate change that has been widely publicized, in all the media and supported by politicians, those scientists have paid for their enthusiasm and courage with their careers, their jobs, and some even with their lives. So the rest don't really want this. You know, people have been weaned off of being heroes. And now we see Egon Cholakian coming out with an appeal and openly saying almost the same things that we are saying. On the one hand, this is cool. However, we should understand that this is not the creative society, but on the other hand, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's really true. He's on the side of people, and that means a lot. He's on the side of humanity. But to understand, in general, what has happened and what our people and other people have started to promote, let's take a look. After all, no really large-scale explosion of information happened, although Egon Cholakian is an influential figure. But, again, there are nuances here too. There are such mastodons of science who are very popular. Their opinions carry a lot of weight. They are widely publicized in the media. Politicians listen to them and so on. But Egon Cholakian is not that kind of a scientist. On the other hand, if we look, I would say that he attracts attention. And he's really
Not an ordinary person.
far from being an ordinary person. You've noted this correctly. He's a pivot. You know, there are scientists who are like cogs in a clockwork, and science rests on them. And if you remove the cog, a malfunction will happen, the chronometer will not work properly, and so forth. So, people like Egon Cholakian are exactly the pivot on which these cogs are held. They tend to be more in the background. That very Mr. Cholakian has actually spent most of his life in the background, although, as a scientist, he really deserves respect. And he's a very intelligent person with a rather broad view of this world. I would say that his statement is serious, and he himself is a serious man. The only question is whether he will be heard. If we look at the fact, and you and I both noticed it, that he spoke at the forum and talked about degassing, he caught our attention then, and we even had the honor of talking about him in one of our conversations. Indeed, he studied volcanology, and the issues of degassing are extremely important. They are really very important, and he is one of the few people in the world who understand how important it is and that it is possible. You know, this fact alone speaks for itself. It speaks of who he really is and how he thinks. Also, he's a physicist, and he's not just his specialty is physics. His specialty is particle physics. Hence, he is close to understanding what we are talking about. And he has really researched, let's say, the non-public side of ALLATRA very well. Based on that, it is safe to say that people like him are 1 in a billion. This is really true. Why? Yes, many Secret Service officers were investigating ALLATRA, but what were they guided by? By publications in the yellow press. They were getting information, first and foremost, about the public side of ALLATRA, from sources that are, let's say, dubious, even though it was voiced on mainstream channels and so forth. But who wrote this and who did it? We actually know it was done by the priestly structures, who were simply slinging mud, so the Secret Service officers were guided by that. And let's say they relied on that as information about ALLATRA. What else did they do? Well, they talked to someone and occasionally wiretapped conversations, at the best. Whereas what we have noticed here is that a few months before the forum, together with our scientists, who are actively involved in the non-public side of ALLATRA, we noticed that, even in the darkest tunnels of the darknet, someone started to target us, moreover, quite intensively. Clearly, it wasn't just some hackers fooling around or something like that. We noticed a systemic approach. Then there was more. Someone downloaded files and copied materials of dozens of our scientists, sometimes even from disconnected laptops, which tells a lot. This indicates that quite serious people were showing interest. In other words, they were not guided by those rumors spread by priests, but really delved into the depth of Alatra itself. The most interesting fact is that they copied the files related precisely to Alatra subjects. Moreover, the files over 20 years and older, those extremely boring materials, I honestly tell you, friends, whom could they interest? We were surprised by that, especially since they were not secret or anything like that. Yet somebody was collecting them from everyone they could detect through that very darknet and other connections, and so they collected information from a certain group of scientists regarding their scientific research, including reports, various data, graphs, and many other things. But all this information is so boring. Who would possibly need it? At the same time, those files that concerned their individual work, their personal files, were intact. In other words, they were of no interest, so we came to the conclusion that someone was purposefully studying it all. Yes, by not quite legal methods, but when the issue concerns not just national but supranational security, this is actually acceptable and right. The only question is, who was interested in the non-public side of Alatra in such detail? If we compare Alatra to an iceberg, all our public activity is just a tip of Alatra. This fact actually pissed off certain priests and caused misunderstanding among many people who didn't delve into its essence, while in this case someone started digging from the depths and approached it quite seriously. For a long time we tried to get through to politicians as well as to various authoritative and influential scientists, but nobody was interested in our materials. It's true. No one paid attention, everyone brushed them off, saying, "What are you talking about?" After that, we started to voice this publicly, although adapted for the masses, in a convenient form, so that the majority of people could understand. We even made reports, but they were also adapted so that as many people as possible would understand the essence of what we are talking about regarding those climatic changes that are taking place, and we voiced what awaits us. Now the times have come, the times that we were talking about back then. So imagine, someone took it all and started studying. We're not saying it's him, not at all. After all, we don't know. We really don't know. But someone has studied us. Based on Dr. Cholakian's public appeal to everyone, where he said that he had thoroughly studied Alatra, and since we understand and know who he actually is, and he is actually far from being an ordinary person, he is precisely among those who train specialists at CIA and other intelligence agencies. It is clear that he has such a mentality, and he tries to understand everything thoroughly, which is good. It is reassuring that he has taken a responsible approach to this issue, that he has studied climatic problems in depth, and that he has been brave enough to come out and speak. That's a serious statement. But let's take a detailed approach to this. What are the chances and prospects in what he has proposed? After all, it's a slightly different model. Yes, it is convenient and understandable. Egon Cholakian was in the kitchen of 4 presidents. He worked with them. What does it mean to be in the kitchen? It means to closely collaborate with a politician, a president. This is where all the behind-the-scenes issues are solved. In other words, he perfectly understands how politicians work, what they perceive, what they don't perceive, and despite that, he made this statement. He is quite an influential scientist. The very facts he voiced about himself, he's a member of the Nobel Committee, he is one of the authors of the new collider, he is actively involved in the creation of the new collider, and so forth. He is often referenced and quoted, and this is well deserved. He is a really smart and authoritative person. In other words, he knows how science works, and he knows their entire internal kitchen. But we also know, and we can also imagine, how his statement will be treated and what he will face. It would seem that our creative society proposal is beneficial to every human being, absolutely every human being, considering that the world today has completely changed. It will never be the same again. Climatic changes have started and they are affecting everyone's life. They are progressing every day. We are approaching a certain point that can put an end to all of humanity, to the existence of the entire humanity. However, when we publicly talk about it, prove it, tell people about it, we have held a lot of forums and provided evidence. The paradox is that we aren't heard, or rather, we are heard, but only by a handful of people. In other words, the information is not spreading lightning fast. Neither politicians nor scientists are familiarizing themselves with it, despite the fact that yes, many scientists take part in those very forums. Even Mr. Cholakian took part in one of them, and so on, but this information doesn't cause a buzz. People do not familiarize themselves with it. Moreover, there are a lot of short-sighted, I would even say, excuse me, slightly moronic people who start making hateful statements regarding this subject, speaking publicly and so on. That is, they begin to oppose and ridicule the creative society, although it is aimed at saving their lives, the lives of their relatives and friends, and the whole mankind. In other words, it is not perceived even by ordinary people. Clearly, the creative society is not interesting for politicians either, because it actually implies the transfer of power to humanity, which means the power won't be concentrated in one hand. Well, it's not quite acceptable for them, for those who are accustomed to ruling, controlling the whole world, solving matters, and having such a royal life, so to say. Well, in this case, everything will be handed over to people and distributed fairly. And this is the least interesting for those who've got a hold of the bowels of the earth and simply exploit them for personal gain, selling what they didn't create to people, which is very convenient and profitable for them. Whereas here, as it turns out, everything should be distributed among all. This is also of no interest to them. A lot of people in science who have been in science all their lives and have never really engaged in it are not interested in this topic either. Why? Because it exposes their stupidity. After all, in the Creative Society project, we say that a person can get some titles and awards when his efficiency increases. That is, if he has been able to improve the lives of each and everyone, if his scientific research has had a qualitative impact on our lives and has improved our lives, then a person gets some titles, awards, and something else, depending on the percentage of improvement. Most people in the scientific world do not quite agree with that. Why? Because they realize that in this case they will get nothing. In other words, these are shallow people who have failed science as well. Of course, they don't like the project either. That is why we acted wisely. We relied on people, on voters. We believe that this is the only way for all people to become aware. And since we do not have access to mass media, we are trying to spread information, let's say, from person to person, using social media where it is possible, where we manage to do it. But this project is really aimed at establishing almost the same scientific center that Dr. Cholakian is talking about. Ultimately, science should unite and save humanity. There is no other way. Why? Our scientists in Alatra are real scientists working in their laboratories and institutes, but they are not indifferent to the future of the world, and they have had enough intelligence to see the obvious, which even these idiots, excuse me, who write hateful comments about us, can already see clearly. Yet they do not have enough intelligence to realize the full complexity of the situation. Whereas our scientists had the intelligence to see it God knows when, and people started to work in that direction, looking for cause and effect relationships and looking for what to do. Of course, over many years we have come to understand that there is an external source of cosmic influence that intensifies the internal energy, that is, it is transformed into endogenous energy in the bowels of our planet. As a result of that, there is everything we see now, and we see the progression that is taking place. And we have realized that we will be able to counteract it once we delve into the microworld. I mean, today, all our science is trying to understand what quantum mechanics is. With all those paradoxes that they encounter, they're trying to understand it at least somehow. We realized a long time ago that the answer lies beyond quantum mechanics. We have been working in that direction for a long time and continue to do so. And it is interesting that Egon Cholakian has also started speaking about this. It is clear that he also understands information at this level. This is also pleasant. And it is pleasant that, as a physicist who deals with the study of elementary particles, I mean the very physics we're talking about, he is willing to take it up, and he also talks about creating a unified center. There are nuances, and let's talk about those nuances. I mean, everything seems to be clear, everything is right, everything is simple, but will politicians support him? While it is on them, on their decision that the implementation of the plan he has proposed, the plan to really save the whole of humanity depends. Just think about it. We have millions of scientists, and only one person has spoken out. But what are politicians going to do? There are plenty of them, thousands of them all over the world. First of all, even if they hear him, it's uncertain if they will. But even if they do, what will their actions be? Let's think logically. They will ask their science advisors. What will those science advisors, meaning those very scientists, say? Will they take the side of humanity and Mr. Cholakian? That's a good question, isn't it? Well, all of us will say, this is logical, the man is telling the truth, and they are obliged to accept it. However, their reputation is at stake, which means their, let's say, pridefulness, their titles and everything else are at stake too. If they say to that very politician, the president, yes, Cholakian is right, we have a problem, and we really need to do what he says, then the politician will ask, why didn't you tell me about this 10 years ago or 5 years ago? It doesn't matter. Why am I hearing it from this person and not from you? What will they say? That they didn't know that? A simple question. But you should understand this correctly, friends. Every person's consciousness works the same way. All of us, regardless of what position we are in now, we all received our dominant images for our lives back in the sandbox. And so, sitting in the same sandbox, we shaped ourselves into what we are today. Some of us became ordinary people like us. Others became presidents. Still others became scientists who give scientific advice to those very presidents. Meanwhile, our images are still from the sandbox. As a rule, these images are reinforced by our pridefulness, megalomania, and, again, our desire to live well. When we get to the top, what do people go there for? To save the world? Why are wars started? Where does such hatred come from? The imposed hatred towards one another. The answer is already clear. Obviously not to save the world, and clearly not to serve humanity. Personal ambitions and interests make people climb the social ladder as high as possible. So they've climbed to the top as high as each of them could. The president became the president, while his advisor, a research scientist, became his advisor. So is he now supposed to admit he is stupid? Will he make such a noble gesture and admit that Mr. Cholakian is right and that the world is about to end? And does that person even know or understand that? Let's just say, do they actually understand that this is a cycle? Of course they don't. And I have a question. Why? You know, I understand. Yes, studying the cycle is extremely difficult, as it would seem. For some reason, many people immediately start thinking that it is necessary to arrange an expedition to go God knows where it is cold and bad, and to extract those I-scores. Yes, they are very informative, and it is quite easy to use them to make judgments about the past. But I have a simple question for the scientific community. Tell me, you've had this information under your feet all this time, everywhere, in any corner in our world. What I mean, in this case, is the geochronological data from the quaternary sediments. Tell me, is it so difficult to study them? Do you know what the paradox is? We addressed scientists who specialize in quaternary geology and asked them, didn't you see the cyclicity? Didn't you see the chemical changes that occurred in the atmosphere and many other things related to the cycle? Do you know what they answered? We didn't have such a task before us. So the question is, what do you engage in? You're scientists after all. Why do our Allatra scientists thoroughly study everything in the widest possible spectrum concerning those very geochronological data of both the quaternary sediments and ice cores, those very observations and historical data which are preserved in religions, in various epics and everywhere else, both in history and, excuse me, in what is under our feet? You know, I would compare this situation around the lack of understanding of cyclicity and the entire seriousness of this situation with human stupidity. There is no other way to call it, sorry, but that's how it is. Imagine there is a city square where there is a group of people with a huge poster where it is clearly written, humanity, you only have a few days left. And it is written what should be done. Millions of people pass by this poster and they don't see that. In the same way, our esteemed scientists do not see what is under their feet, that, excuse me, throughout our history, the cyclicity and those problems which we will face have been described in bright colors. And now we have faced these problems in the worst-case scenario. It is indeed the worst scenario one can imagine. We have destroyed the immunity of our planet. We have disrupted the main air conditioner, the one that used to save lives. This is exactly the anthropogenic factor. And what is next? It's a good question. What is next? We offered the creative society that gave a chance. Egon Cholakian is offering his own option. And we have discussed, will politicians accept it? Good question. Will the scientific community accept it? Good question. Let's consider the following option. Okay, let's suppose by some miracle politicians hear and understand him and sit down at the same table. Well, a miracle has happened. I don't know how. He also addressed journalists, so journalists suddenly decide without any payment to tell about what is coming and to warn the entire humanity so that people come to their senses and somehow try to survive. Okay, a miracle has happened. Corrupt mouthpieces have become humans. This is possible. I don't deny it as an option. Politicians have heard it, sat down at the same table and decided to act properly to create a planned, unified economy and to prepare, let's say, a ground for transition to new conditions of existence. This is very convenient for them. They retain authority in their countries. The only thing is that they need to think about a common economy and, again, about that very army, since all wars and strife should be stopped. And development of new types of weapons will definitely have to be stopped too. They are not needed. And huge armies that exist will have to be retrained a little bit so that all their lives they have been taught to kill people, but now they should be retrained so that they start saving people. Plus, equipment and devices should be prepared. Well, we must act quickly. This is human life and it can be our own life at any moment. Therefore, this is the right decision. They have also decided to open the borders and, most importantly, to open a unified scientific center and transfer all science under it. Moreover, unlimited funding has to be ensured for this center In fact, we as humanity should have established this center a long time ago and should have united all science, the entire scientific potential, and, excuse me, we should have provided scientists with all the means they need, both financial and material ones. Everything must be done at their call. We must really provide them with everything they need and help them if we want to survive. But so far, we are only philosophizing. Okay, a miracle has occurred. Politicians have made a decision. What will happen next? And what will the highly respected man who made this proposal to establish this center face? You have no idea, friends. While we know science from within, there are a lot of authority figures there who are severely ill with megalomania, who hardly invested anything in science, but they have grown to significant posts, and they are used to heading everything and, most importantly, to controlling financial flows. Can you imagine what kind of fuss will begin? Now let's imagine we've established this center, we as humanity have given everything it needs, but pardon the expression, some charlatan has become the head of it who exalted himself in science. It so happened, but in reality he is far from science. He is only accustomed to the fact that his name is on front pages, everyone is talking about him, and he redistributes the flows of funds. But he has nothing to do with science or definitely doesn't understand it properly. Although he has a serious task. He has to not only consolidate and rally all scientists, but also to set a clear task for everyone, which they must complete in the shortest possible time. Tell me, will such a person be able to achieve a result? And the result should be salvation of our lives and salvation of our entire planet. Can such a scenario take place easily? Such people actually make friends very well, win trust, and they are very close to politicians and to the powers that be. Again, we are guided by our own consciousness, and we are humans. By us, I mean politicians, scientists, and ordinary people, and consciousness works the same way in all of us. Whom will that very politician or politicians appoint? Egon Cholakian? Or such a popular person, even if he's a charlatan from science? Here's the answer to what kind of a result we can get. Because of such an ordinary human mistake, appointment of a wrong person to a very important and responsible position. But will those highly respected and reputable researchers who rule science across the world agree, for example, that such a person as Egon Cholakian would head this scientific center? Here's the answer, right? So, yes, he suggested a real way out, the most convenient one for politicians, for science, and for all of humanity, for the current period of time. Certainly, the best option is the creative society, that's for sure. It is beneficial and wonderful for everyone, and all barriers will be removed. However, there are problems with spreading information about it. It takes time. Perhaps Dr. Cholakian's proposal will make it possible to do this more quickly. You see, we are faced with the problem of politics and certain fellows in science who can slow down the whole process. If we do not implement the creative society, and if we as humanity do not implement Egon Cholakian's plan, the same thing will happen to us, as just happened in Hawaii and in China. I mean, we will be flooded and burned, and eventually everything will be destroyed. These are objective facts that are already reaching even the stupidest people in this world. That is, they look, see, and begin to think about it a little bit. It is bad that stupid people, sometimes short-sighted ones, rule this world and have an influence on consciousness of the masses. who do not see what is obvious. After all, those fools often say, everything is fine, look, the sun is shining. It is shining. But look at its activity. Look at how much harm the solar radiation is doing at the moment, when it is supposed to bring benefit. Well, fools don't know about that. So the problems are serious, and I would say there are prospects in Egon's proposal too, of course. If we consider it from our perspective, I mean from the perspective of the creative society, if what he proposed is implemented, it may be a forerunner of the creative society. If we face the truth, why? If countries really unite and open borders, and politicians finally begin to care about people and their lives, not about themselves, not about their own well-being and small groups close to them, but really about people, thus they will fulfill their duty to those who elected them. If they have enough intelligence and humaneness to understand the entire current situation, the whole seriousness and the fact that urgent actions are required, that the actions should have been taken yesterday, well, they didn't understand yesterday, but have understood today, they will do it, it will be wonderful. If the issue is resolved with those very scientists, here politicians can play a role and give a command to appoint those who are needed indeed. If this center starts working, we have a great chance to save humanity. Then it will already be possible, taking into account that people will get used to living better and will see the benefits of unification, while politicians will stop dividing us, then perhaps we'll get purified. You know, we will go through at least some kind of catharsis, and then it will be natural and understandable why the creative society is needed and what for. Yes, in this case, it will be implemented much later than we could have done that, but it's a chance. It will be worse if we do nothing and the world gets destroyed. That's the worst option. As for what is already happening with the climate, I think it is visible, and we shouldn't even talk about it anymore. Although, on the other hand, why not? Again, that very Egon Cholakian touched upon China. We discussed it a lot, and he started talking about it too. Why? Because it is clear that China, the Arabian Peninsula, and several other countries along with them are the first to whom we can say goodbye, so to say. These are the countries that will suffer first of all. Well, I would say the following to me. Sorry for the scientific approach in this case, but we need to face the truth. We as humanity will suffer very much if we lose China. Well, this may happen literally in 5 years. So here I totally agree with Egon Cholakian. China is the most powerful industry and the center of science. Their experience is enormous. At present, when such cataclysms are going on and we are moving, although slowly, but towards the inevitable. Well, I wouldn't say we are moving slowly. Now we are moving in leaps and bounds and everything is changing before our eyes. If we lose China, we will lose unique technologies and capabilities. We shouldn't make this happen, because it will affect everyone. We shouldn't lose Korea. And we shouldn't lose the Arabian Peninsula. We shouldn't, for these are people. Well, people are us. Although, if we approach this issue seriously, we do have a chance to pass. Even if we start doing everything right now, establish the scientific center and connect the maximum number of our smart scientists, and, of course, we will provide all the knowledge that Allatra has. The true scientists won't have to start from scratch, but will have a good foundation for their work, and our chances for survival are huge in this case. But we'll have losses anyway. We will no longer be able to pass the cycle without losses. Look how much we have already lost. Literally, during this month, our human losses are already enormous. Territories, financial losses, and most terrible of all, the loss of our lives, our human lives, and we understand that what is happening to the ocean and in the earth's bowels is a big problem. Again, very few scientists understand even what I want to say now, and it's unlikely that they heard it, although it's a fundamental point. I'm referring to magmatic flows which are now creating new directions for themselves, and magma is heating and expanding due to additional energy and the instability of our core. Yes, it is endogenous heat, but it is generated because our planet's core is receiving an additional huge amount of energy, hence all the troubles. Well, and there is the anthropogenic factor. We already discussed it. Regarding our ocean, it doesn't fulfill its function, but we can restore everything if we have at least any chance. Therefore, I apologize for my confusing speech. But the situation is indeed serious and extremely difficult. Of course, we are willing and doing everything in our power to somehow save our planet. We live here. It is our common home. We understand that people do not want to hear us. And we understand that Egon Cholakian will face the same lack of understanding. And a lot of politicians and scientists will not want to hear him either. And it is unlikely that he'll be supported by the entire humanity. Well, over time everything will fall into place and politicians will run after him and after us and look for solutions if we are still here at the time when they realize that the problem is actually acute and real. But they will probably understand it when a major half of the world is destroyed. They are unlikely to start acting earlier. Well, it's because of power and fairy tales from those very advisors who are near them, scientific advisors, who, as we already discussed, will primarily think about their own interests, their own megalomania and decent status in society, rather than about the whole of humanity. But it's not just their problem. It's the problem of each of us. Are we really different? That's the problem. However, we need to find common humaneness for everyone somehow. We need to somehow overcome our stupidity, become stronger, more humane, join hands, face the truth, and at least admit that Egon Cholakian is right, and support at least him, if it is so difficult to understand all the positive aspects of the creative society. I agree it is difficult to realize all the benefits of the creative society, and it is even more difficult to realize that all people will be equal at a time when many strive to be much superior to others. We have created such a world, and we ourselves are such. If we understand this, we will understand that we can change everything and change ourselves, and then we'll have a chance. But this chance depends on everyone's choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you, and God's love.